In this video, we're going to study a number of portfolios and also discuss a number of very critical issues, including reserve upgrades and how they're related to calendar year trends, total reserve increases and how they're related to calendar year trends, and also debunk one or two myths about reserve upgrades. We'll also look at a company called Frontier that was closed by the New York Insurance Commissioner in the late 90s, but you'll also see that its calendar year trend, or the calendar year trend that they experienced in the prior 4 or 5 years, had been the same, which sort of leads one to conclude that they weren't cognizant of this particular trend, which was actually a pretty high trend. And then we're going to look at another study where we're going to compare paid losses versus case reserve estimates, and we're going to compare their calendar year trends, and you'll be able to tell almost in an instant that the year in which this particular company was sold or purchased, and I'll be able to tell you also that the one of the insurance companies that participated in providing some coverage on the aggregate loss reserve, a stop loss cover on the aggregate loss, lost a lot of money. So let me open sort of the database that I've been using quite often to illustrate a lot of different new concepts and applications and benefits of ICFAS Plus. So let's go first to California, and I've got a Californian-based portfolio here. It's Workers Comp, and you probably are aware that in the late 90s and around 2001, a lot of companies had lost a lot of money writing Workers Comp in California, and some of them had to be shut down, including Frontier. And for this particular company that writes a large volume, you'll see that there was a huge calendar year trend starting in 1990, but in fact the prior year trends were also very high, in fact higher, and the more recent trend from 1990 is in fact lower. Let's just do the auto validation. This is where we remove years and see how the distributions of the total reserves change. Let's remove up to 6 years. So we're going to redo the calculations 7 times, and we've got an auto validation table. And if you look at that, you'll see that the mean of the reserve distribution beyond the year 1999 slightly increases. Well, that is as a result, as if you remove years, you can see that the trend, the estimate of the trend actually increases. I guess what we're saying is that the trend from 1990 to 94 is slightly higher than the average trend from 1990 to 1999. So if this company has experienced this huge trend where for say 10 years, and so have a lot of other companies writing Workers Comp in California, why is it that they lost a lot of money? And my guess is that they were not cognizant of this calendar year trend that erodes your capital exponentially. Let's look at another company, and I'll reveal its name. It's called Frontier. There it is. And let me just run this model and just show you the calendar year trend. So this company was closed around 1999, I think, or in fact, 99. The insurance commissioner was looking very carefully at this company, and they were very concerned about its total reserves, and either they closed it in 99 or the year 2000. But you can see since 94, this company has experienced a trend of 13.7% plus minus 2.72, which kind of doubles, I guess, every about 5 years, 5 to 6 years. So you know you're spending money that's growing exponentially. You're paying for losses that are growing exponentially, and if you're not cognizant of that, then you remain under reserved. You also remain underpriced, and well, in this particular case, you had to be shut down. And I think that happens quite often. And in fact, I believe there are a lot of myths about total reserve upgrades and or total reserve increases. I guess they're a little bit different, but let's discuss that now. Now, here's a question for you before I provide the answer. Suppose you've got a portfolio, it's a triangle, paid losses, and it's a line of business where you write the same risks every year. And the same mix of business every accident year and the same volume. And suppose in this particular triangle, because you've used Ecofus Plus, you've actually measured a constant trend, say 5%, which really is a pretty low trend. I've seen trends that you'll see later on when we look at AM Best data, a number of companies, they have trends of 13%. And that trend along the calendar years, even after you adjust for accident years, of 14, 15, 17%. But let's suppose you only experience 5%. So you're pretty lucky. Now, what would you have to do to your premium each year per unit risk? You write the same volume, the same mix of risks. You would have to increase your premium each year per unit risk by at least 5%. Otherwise, you'll be underpriced. What about your reserves? Well, if you identify that particular trend of 5%, say plus minus 0, you should be forecasting your reserves along that trend line in order to maintain consistent estimates of prior year ultimates. So you continue along that trend line of 5%, and that's the way you do your reserve calculations. Now, what would you have to do to the total reserves each year? Well, let's just see. Going about total reserves. So at the end of 2004, you're here. Next year, you add another diagonal, which you pay for. But you've got a new accident year, 2005. So next year, you pay for this diagonal. That means your reserves for the accident years 2004 and prior have reduced because you've paid for additional calendar year. But then you have to reserve for additional accident year. So what actually happens to your total reserves as you move from 2004 to 2005? Now, you pay for calendar year, you have to now reserve for new accident year, and you know that the calendar year trend as an axiom, we know this is an axiomatic result, projects along the accident years and the development years. And the answer is that you have to increase your total reserves by at least, and I repeat, by at least 5% in order to maintain consistent estimates of prior year ultimates. So let's prove that. Regular reserve upgrades means that the company, this is a big myth, regular reserve upgrades, and by reserve upgrade I now mean regular total increases of reserves. You're not really upgrading your reserves for the prior year. Regular reserve upgrade means that the company is and has been under reserved, and a significant increase, a big hit in reserves means no subsequent reserve increases will be required. That's wrong. We'll see why in a moment. This understanding of the reserving process contradicts a very simple arithmetic truism. Repeated total reserve upgrades does not mean under-reserving. Indeed, the converse might be true. If total reserves are not increased annually, then the company is likely to be under-reserved. So it's actually the other way around. How do we prove that? Okay, so let's suppose for a triangle, we'll just create some deterministic numbers. There's accident year W. There's development year D. So the calendar year must be W plus D. So on the log scale, the paid loss on the logarithmic scale at accident year W, development year D, is 10 minus 0.3 by development year. So there's a decay of 30%, but the inflation is 5% on the logarithmic scale. It's a constant trend. If you're an accident year W and development year D, the corresponding calendar year is W plus D. So the inflation up to that particular calendar year, W plus D minus 1, and you multiply it by the 0.05. So these are deterministic numbers, and there's no error to them. So this is the picture of the company for the years 1999 to the accident year 2004. The last calendar year is 2004. We're going to make another assumption that, in fact, the payments will run off at development year 5. Development period 5, they run off, there's not more to pay. So this is the story at the end of 2004. This is the story if we had another calendar year, 2005. So let's look at a summary here. Okay. The mean reserve at the end of 2004 is here. The ultimates are here, and you can see that they remain consistent. When you add another calendar year, the ultimates for 1999 to 2004 in this table at calendar year 2004 is the same as at year-end 2005. Well, these are all deterministic numbers. Now, the change in total in ultimates from accident year to accident year on a dollar scale increased by a little bit more than 5%, because the trend on a dollar scale is slightly higher than it is on a log scale. What about the total reserves? The total reserves at the end of year 2004 is 169,078, and the total reserves at the end of 2005 is higher, 177. And here we're maintaining consistent estimates of prior year ultimates. Now, so the total reserves has also increased by at least 5%. Well, here's a simple proof of this axiom. That's what it is, because that axiom is related to the axioms that have to do with calendar year trends. You're at the end of 2004. The total reserve will be the discrete area, the sum of the numbers in the cells of this triangle here. Let's straighten this line here. Okay. Now at the end of 2005, you've got to find the discrete area of the bottom triangle. So you add up the numbers in all the cells in triangle A, which is the top triangle, and then you've got triangle B, which is the bottom triangle. Now for every cell in the top triangle A, there's a corresponding cell below it in triangle B. The number of cells in triangle A is the same as the number of cells in triangle B. But the number below it in triangle B, corresponding to the number above it in triangle A, is 5% higher, because the accident year trend, the calendar year trend projects along the accident years. So the discrete area of A is 5% less than the discrete area of B, and accordingly, the total reserves increased by at least 5%. Of course, why at least 5%? Because I've assumed that it runs off at development year 5. If it didn't run off at development year 5, you'll also have another payment here. Now, there is a paper. Let's go to the library. This is the Insureware website. If we go to the library, publications, the technical publications. Let's just look at the technical publications. Maybe it's there. Yes, that's about 30 correlations of linearity, common misconception, correlated log normals, loss reserve upgrades of pervasive math. Outward insurance, no, it's not there, so let's go back. Library, publications, other. Oops, what's happening? Will your next reserve upgrade be your last? Now, this paper is published in Contingencies by the American Academy of Actuaries. It's 2004, January, February 2004. It's pages 40 to 44. Okay. Anyway, if you go to this part of our website, you'll get the link to the actual paper. And let me just illustrate what this paper tries to point out. Suppose the actual calendar year trend after adjusting for the accident year trend, so the resultant, if you like, accident year trend, suppose is 15%. And it's been there for many years. And we'll show you such cases when we select certain companies for AM Best or NIC Schedule P. But suppose you've been increasing your total reserves. You write the same mix of risks each year, and you've been increasing your total reserves by 4% each year. And also you've been increasing your premiums each year by 4%. Then in 2005, say, you call in a consultant to reevaluate all your reserves, and by sheer luck, they actually increase your reserves, and they actually reach that level on this trend line, by sheer luck. But you don't even know that. And then the consulting firm says, you've just had a big shot. The CEO says, we've just had a big shot in increasing our total reserves. We upgraded the reserves of prior years, and that's it. There's no more need for increasing total reserves. Well, the answer is that that statement is completely erroneous. Because once you reach that trend line, you'll have to continue increasing your total reserves, provided the company keeps on going in that direction, by 15% each year. And if you don't, you're going to reach a point where when you want to have a major upgrade in your reserves, you just won't have sufficient surplus. So one thing you can do is you can look at some large companies, maybe like AIG and so on, and just look at their balance sheet from year to year, and just look at their total reserves from year to year. And let's suppose they write the same premium volume each year. Suppose they do that. And then you look at their total reserves from year to year, the increase is pretty small, 2%, 3%. I think there's something wrong, because that would mean actually that the total inflation in their average book of business and their total business is only 3% or 2%. What if it doesn't increase at all? They're likely to be under-reserved, unless, of course, their reserves are already at a high level, so they don't have to increase them for many years, but that's also doubtful. So I think by looking at a lot of balance sheets, you can tell a lot, and also in that paper, if we go back to the paper, it discusses how you can look at some statistics in the balance sheet that will alert you, just in the balance sheet, without doing any reserve calculations, that could alert you to under-reserving, without actually looking at the balance sheet and knowing the trends in the company. There's the paper. It appears on the Contingencies American Academy of Actuaries website. And there are some statistics that you can calculate that from the balance sheet, total reserves on current liabilities, which is actually just the reserves for the next calendar year. By looking at these kind of ratios and understanding some of the trends that you could find in AM Best or NIC Schedule P data, and that will point out whether further investigation should be conducted in the company. All right, a completely different issue now, and that is paid losses versus case reserve estimates. So let's look at an example here. Here's a model. I'm going to run two models, one for paid losses and one for case reserve estimates. And compare them. If you look at the right, you've got the paid losses for the company, and you'll see that they've always been increasing. Let's expand this window. In the early years, the trend is 29.58. It drops down to 9.64 for many years, and then back to 29.58. Whereas the case reserve estimates, zero trend, a decreasing trend, let's study them more carefully, zero trend, a major decreasing trend of minus 28.46 plus minus 2.2, that's maybe 30% a year for 2 years. Then they start increasing, 23.94% for 2 years. It's the kind of increase you sometimes have in the paid losses. That's 29.58, and then another increase. Now, when was this company purchased or sold? Well, the paid losses on the right have always been going up. The cases of estimates went down for 2 years. So while they were negotiating the sale, they reduced their cases of estimates for 2 years by almost 30% a year. The company was sold or purchased in 1998. Now, this is quite interesting. When this company that the data belongs to saw this, They were a subscriber to ICFIS Plus in the year 2003. Sorry, in the year they became a subscriber in 2003, I should say. But you would have even seen this in 1998. If I only had the data till 1998, you would see that the calendar year trend is up, yet there's a reduction in case reserve estimates. When they saw that, they said somebody didn't do due diligence. Anyway, I showed it to one of a reinsurance company that a client of mine, and the COO, the CEO, said to me, "Look, we actually were involved in the providing some stop loss cover on the aggregate reserves for the seller, and we lost quite a bit of money." If you study the incurred data, using the Stanley Gosha family modeling framework, and these are the residuals, weighted standardized residuals of the volume-weighted average ratios, or the chain ladder ratios, as the Europeans call them. Well, you'll see one thing, that it underfits these accident years, overfits these, underfits all these. It also underfits the most recent calendar year. So typically it will give you an answer that's probably too low. But apart from that, it will probably give you a meaningless answer, because very often ratios don't have any predictive power. But most importantly, it is impossible to tell what's going on in the paid losses vis-a-vis what's going on in the case reserve estimates by modeling the incurred data. It's impossible. You have to model them separately. And what we most often will find is that the case reserve estimates actually lag paid losses. If there's a change in trend in the paid losses, it's reflected in the case reserve estimates usually some years later. So let's look at another example. If we look at this one, and you'll see that in this example, the case reserve estimates are actually doing catch-up. Okay, the paid losses are on the left. They're going up at 13%, 0, 13%. On the right, case estimate 7%, but they only moved to 0.95, whereas the paid losses on the left changed to 0 at 93. So the case reserve estimates flatten out 2 years later. The paid losses start increasing again in 1996 at 13% plus minus 0.71%, whereas the case reserve estimates start increasing in 1999, which is 3 years later, and but a much higher rate. So I guess what they're doing there is catch up. So that should not be a concern to the company. This huge increase in trend in the case estimates, it should be viewed and interpreted as catch up. Along with calendar accident years, you can see they're pretty highly correlated. They seem to move most of the time, for most years, in the same direction. Okay, so we've illustrated with three or four examples a lot of very important issues, and that is that the calendar year trend that you measure in the data is one of the critical assumptions you make in forecasting the reserve distributions, of course, apart from also knowing the process variability. The myth about total reserve increases or reserve upgrades, and that is that most companies should be increasing their total reserves each year if they are writing the same mix and volume of business each accident year. And we've seen a company that was closed down by the New York Insurance Commissioner, and yet its calendar year trend had been the same for the last 4 or 5 years. And we've also now I think we should appreciate now that when you model data, you should be modeling the pay data and the case reserve estimates separately to find out how they're related. And also, once you find the relationship, you'll see in the subsequent video where we look at when we study the multiple probabilistic trend family modeling framework, that we can actually find a composite model or composite model for the paid losses and the case reserve.